All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been creating a series of video presentations that are based off of the PowerPoint slides for one of the books for the class. That book is shown here as being Murock's JavaScript, and jQuery 4th edition. I've gone through all of the first section. I started on the second, but I decided to jump over to the third. And now I've done 12 and 13, so I'm going to jump into 14, which is how to work with browser objects, cookies, and web storage. All right, so without any further ado, let's get started. So, how to work with browser objects, cookies, and web storage. As always, we've first got our applied objectives, as you can see right there, and some of these we have discussed again already, and some we have not. And here's the first page of our knowledge objectives, and the second page of our knowledge objectives. All right, so it says here a URL with search parameters. Well, let's talk about what this is. First of all, this is going to be a get. How do I know that? Because it's got the question mark and it's got some stuff here. All right, so we want to go to http://www.murock.com. All right, and the port number is going to be 8181. The folder will be JavaScript, and under that folder, we want to open up the location.html file. And we are passing to that something called first, which has a value of G, and something called last, which has a value of hopper, and looks like it's got an ID of result with it as well. So when you break this down into that location object, this is what you've got. So the href, the hypertext reference, is the complete URL. The protocol is http://. I always thought it was http://, but I'll defer to what the authors say here. And more today, you're finding the protocol changing, so it's not http://, it's https://. So you've got secure. All right, the host name is murock.com. The port is 8181. The host, as you can see, is www.murock.com:8181. The path is /JavaScript/location URL. The search has got the first name and the last name, and I guess that's a hash, which has got the result. All right, the methods, as you can see right there, you can reload, which reloads the current web page, and replace, which loads a new page into the browser and replaces the current page in the history list. All right. So this shows you here how you can load a new page. You can either just say location equals, which I believe is the defaults to href then. All right, and to reload a page then, location.reload. Notice the difference. When you don't provide anything, it assumes that the current page is cached in the memory on the machine. But if you say reload true, it tells it to go out to the server. You may want to do this if you know that the content of the page changes a lot very frequently. All right, and again, here's how you can load a new page and overwrite the current history page. Is shown on the bottom there. All right. The length property of the history object, as it says, that's the number of URLs that are in there. And the rest of the stuff, basically, it's kind of positional. So you can call back to go back one, forward to go forward one, go, where you give it a number, and then it says it goes back or it goes forward, backwards if it's a negative number, forwards if it's a positive number, and go with a substring, which goes to the most recent URL in the history that has that substring in it. So again, here are some examples. And some of this might not be possible. If you've just logged in, you can't really go forward 2 and you can't really go backward 3. All right. The 4 pages of the tutorial application. Well, notice what they have there. Okay. The first thing to notice, okay, you've got enter and you've got tutorial. My guess is if you click tutorial, that'll bring you right back to here. Enter will bring you here. Here you can only go forward. So if you're on page 1, you can only click next to go to page 2. If you're on page 2, you can click next to go to page 3 or previous to go back to page 1. And if you're on page 3, you can only go backwards or you can finish. And they show you the associated HTML and the JavaScript, which again utilizes the location object. And as you'd probably guess, again, this is not the only way to do this, probably one of the more straightforward ways of doing it. All right. A browser usually gets a cookie as part of an HTTP response. Cookies over the years have gotten a bad rap. Cookies are not executable files, they're text files. Typically, they have a size limit on them of about 4K, but they're text files, typically that the server writes to the browser. All right. A browser, as it says, sends the cookie back to the server with each HTTP request. So the cookie, in a way, then, is making a round trip. All right. The attributes of a cookie, there's even more than what are shown here. Notice the max age, the lifetime of the cookie in seconds. The path on the web server that can see the cookie, the domain names that can see the cookie, and whether it's secure or not. And if it's secure, as it says, the cookie must be encrypted when it's transmitted. And it can only be transmitted when the browser and the server have HTTPS or some other kind of secure connection. So the terms related to cookies, cookie, session cookie, and persistent cookie. So what's the difference between a session cookie and a persistent cookie? Typically with a session cookie, it will either go out, it'll be removed either when the session ends or sometimes up to 20 minutes after the session ends. A persistent cookie will remain even after the session is ended, the cookie will remain. Functions for working with cookies, encoding and decoding URI components. URI is Uniform Resource Indicator. It's a superset of a URL. So they show there how you can create a cookie. Again, not the only way, of course, but this is a simple way of creating one. Want to always give it a name, and then we're adding data, and we're adding a path, and we're telling it to store it. Now, it says how to create a persistent cookie. There's other ways of doing it other than this. All right, I believe you can give it a date, at least you used to be able to, that was way off in the future. And if you've got a cookie that's out there that you don't want anymore, you can give it typically an expiry date. So you can give it a date in the past, and then it'll go away. You can add multiple cookies to the document.cookie object. Normally, I think, at least I know it used to be, that it was about 20 cookies were the most you could have at any one time. setCookie, as it says, can be used to set a session cookie, where basically you're going to say how long you want it to stay. Persistent cookie, you don't do that, and it'll just stick around. All right. There's a get cookie by name function, as it says, can be used to get a cookie by its name. So this should bring you back everything that's in your document.cookie object, and you're putting it in cookies. Then you're asking it to find the first instance of whatever name you're going to provide for it. If it returns -1, there's no cookie by that name, so you just return the empty string. Otherwise, as it says, adjust so that the name and the equal sign aren't included in the result, so you just get the cookie returned. Get the index of the semicolon because you don't want to include that either. Use the start and the end index because all you want to get in here is just the value of the cookie. And then it says you can use the get cookie by name function to read a cookie. Again, there's also a delete. Okay. Again, set the max age to 0. I know at least in the past you used to be able to give it a negative value as well. There's a delete cookie function that, as it says, is deleting the cookie. All right, so what they're going to do in the next several chapters is build this task list or to-do list or whatever you want to call it. So you can type in here, for instance, they typed in get specs for new project. They clicked add task and it went in there. Then they clicked meet with Mike, they clicked add task and it went in there. And it pushed the get specs for new project down. Then they put finish current project, clicked add task, and it became the new one on top. If you click clear, of course, they go away. The HTML is fairly straightforward for this. So is the CSS. So let's take a quick look at the JavaScript for it. So we're setting the cookie. Okay. Here we're getting the cookie by the name. Here's the delete cookie. So basically we're providing everything we might want to do to and with the cookie. All right. Now when you look at this, all we've got right now is we've got the ability to insert something and we've got the ability to show what we have in here. We don't have the ability to update what's in there. And I guess you could say we've got the ability to mass delete with a clear tasks. So typically when you start creating applications along this vein, you start talking about CRUD. And CRUD is an acronym for create, read, update, and delete. Well, create is when you put something in here and click add task. Read is what you're showing in here. Update is not provided. And delete is clear tasks. So the problem with that is, in its current format, every time you stop your session, all right, typically, I mean, it depends on how you've got this set up, I guess. But what has happened over the last few years is there's been something that's created. It's called local storage. And for lack of better words, local storage is kind of like your own personal database where you can keep stuff. So you save things in there, and you typically save them in there as key value pairs. And if you don't know what a key value pair is, kind of think of it as a definition in a dictionary, where the definition is the key, and I'm sorry, where the name of the term is the key and the definition is the value. So you notice there's a get item, a set item, a remove item, and a clear. Now that's for local storage. There's also session storage, which works in a very similar manner. They show an example here of JavaScript that, as mentioned, uses local and session storage for hit counters. Why would you want that? Well, I mean, a hit counter is something that should persist. It shouldn't start over again all the time, because then there'd always be just one person who came there. You typically don't want it to ever start over. You want it to persist. So this is an example of how you could use that. All right, so all you've been introduced to here is web storage, key value pair, local storage, and session storage. All right. So they go back and they recreate this now using web storage. So again, it will persist. So you'll notice in here, local storage dot my tasks. All right. So tasks either equal the current tasks or nothing if there aren't any. And then we want to concatenate that with whatever we just added. We can again remove in here as well and display. Now, when you use local storage and you go in and you bring up the developer tools, you can go to the application panel that's right there and go down to cookies or go to local storage, and you can see what you have available to you. We've talked a little about this before in earlier chapters, that one way to bring up the developer tools is to press F12. Usually another way is to right mouse click on the screen that you've got up and choose Inspect. All right, again, click on the Application tab and then look in the Storage section. And then expand the one you want, be it cookies, local storage, session storage, or whatever. To delete an item, as it says, right mouse click on it, choose Delete. To edit it, right click on it and choose Edit. To make sure that the edit or the deletion has been applied, make sure to refresh the page. And it looks like that's about it. So we have finished chapter 14, which was kind of a shorter chapter. So I think what I will do, try that again, is stop. And when we get to chapter 15, now this is my humble opinion here. Please listen to this lecture and listen closely, because they're going to talk about some of the new ways to manipulate arrays in here. Okay, I'll be back with that in just a few minutes.